Hello and welcome to the next section of videos about AWS Lambda in Go. During this section we will be looking at the AWS SDK and how to use it to access other AWS services from within your Lambdas. The SDK is primarily just a really large library. You can get that with go get-u github.com aws-sdk-go. Once you've got that, you will find it in your source file in GitHub, AWS, SDK-go. Now there's a lot of folders in here, but there are two that matter to us the most. They are AWS and Service. Let's take a look at Service first. Now this is a massive collection of all of the AWS services that Lambda can support. As you can see, we can access the Lambda services as well as the S3 service or any other service that we want to. But because we're going to be looking primarily at the S3 service, let's take a look in there. Again, there are a lot of lines of code in here, but the ones that matter the most to us are API.go and service.go. So in here, primarily we have a large collection of functions that we can call on our S3 objects and structs that we can use for our inputs. Now these structs will basically all be converted to JSON at some point in order to send, but that is all we need to know. The one we are going to be using later is one called put object with context. And this will take a context and the input object along with whatever options we want, but we only really need to worry about the input object. I'll show you how we get the rest of that later. The service file includes the S3 struct type and its new method, along with a few other things. But this is the method we're going to be using, and to work with this we will need a config provider. Again, there are plenty more options. Feel free to take a look at these at your leisure. The README file is worth taking a look at as well, of course. But that assumes that we're not using the AWS Lambda Go library that we will be in order to run this. So do remember that when you're reading through. Some things you won't need to do because we've got the other library handling them. And if we go into AWS, the other thing we're going to need is to look at is this session. As you can see, the session provides a central location to create service clients from. So when we start our program, in order to access the various other services, we're going to create a session that can then call all of these other services. So the session is the central object. So we will make one session at the beginning of our Lambda, and no matter how many services we call, we're going to get those services from the same session. There's not a lot more we really need to look at in here, but we will take a quick peek at the README just so you can. So this describes its own purpose, and I'm going to read this out. The SDK includes the Go types and utilities you can use to make requests to AWS Service APIs. And that's really it. When you write your Lambdas to access stuff, you can keep your type safety because AWS have provided these structs which provide the exact right type and JSON in the exact right way for you to be able to use them and not worry that a typo is going to stop it working unexpectedly. That is everything you need to know about the SDK before we get started. Just be aware that you can look through and find all of the libraries you need as you start working on a project.